really want to talk to you about, I think, as Matt went through and explained the subsequent activities that you're going to have, really I'm just going to talk about the essentials, but we'll elaborate on those and answer any question you want, okay, about any one of those things. Won't be here all night, sun will go down. But when I walked out, my wife said, "Let me see what you're doing." She said, "That's 2 hours." And I said, "No, it's 30 minutes. She said, you could do a whole course on this." And I said, "Yeah, I could." But we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about why you run, some of the essentials, you know, in why you run. And you're going to hear about running mechanics and those kind of things and strength training. I have real opinions on those, and I'm a certified strength and conditioning person as well, but that's a whole different, you know, that's a whole different story than we're going to cover tonight. Well, what I usually find in groups like this, and I've done everything from, you know, clinics, track and field, or cross-country clinics with, you know, 700 to 800 people in them, to Weight Watchers camps. And which I learned more in the Weight Watchers camp than you would ever think. I mean, I was imparting, you know, the activities and what we were doing, but what I learned a lot about was people's motivations and people's resistance to their own activity, their own insecurities, and the things, you know, that people work with. Well, when I put this together, I thought, what could we do that would cover many different people in here? And I thought, well, let's talk about the running. You know, this is, to me, I've been going since my first race was maybe I was 12 or 13 years old. But I knew when I was in first grade that I could run. And so from that time to 68 years, well, not 68 years later, but, you know, maybe 62 years later, here I am. I'm still, you know, still doing this almost daily. And, but not at great volumes. You know, people say, well, you must run all the time. And no, I run frequently. I run frequently, but not a lot in terms of volume. If I have so much activity at practice that if I can't train for myself and train others effectively at the same time, because it's very consuming to do it, you know, to do those things correctly. But if I could be alone, sure, I would be happy to train myself, but not much more. I think that we all have to go forward looking at what are our physical limitations, what are our physical abilities, and how do we balance those in a healthy fashion. You really have to, an awful lot of people overtrain. And they overtrain because actually sometimes if they do less training, they'd be better. But they get absorbed in it and don't know how to back away and balance what they're doing. So as we talk about the essentials, you know, it's not just running, it's training, and it's living through those activities. It's life extension activities without the drugs. You know, our bodies make our own good fortune. You know, if we activate what we do, if we time what we do, and we're willing to take appropriate recovery, our bodies will help us stay healthy. They'll take the growth hormone or the testosterone or whatever it may be that we can still secrete as we get older, but it will take those things as ongoing basis as part of our foundation for good health. But activity is a critical factor in making those things work. So the essentials. And if for those of you that are novices, I think the first thing we have to talk about, even for those of us that are returning or maintaining, is emotional readiness. You know, each day that I go out the door, each day that I go to practice, I have to take some time to collect. If I'm going to go to practice, I can't go to practice frantically to practice and be able to be a good communicator. I have to just step back. If I'm going to demonstrate, I have to rehearse in my mind before I go out there what I'm going to do. But is that emotional or intellectual readiness? Maybe a little bit of both. But emotional readiness means that we have decided what we need to do, we're going to make a commitment to what we're going to do, and we're going to learn through the process. And we're not going to always judge ourselves. I would like people to evaluate themselves every day, but not judge ourselves on our failures, but evaluate ourselves on what we've done well and what we can do better. I think that there's a central positive location that we have to have in order to be effective. Goals and destinations. Some of you are here to learn how to run maybe a half marathon, and this is the foundation piece, or a marathon. I'm not a great marathon fan myself, but it keeps a lot of doctors employed. And so I can't run that activity down right now, right? But I think it's true. We have a lot of people that can run marathons. I've never run one. I think I have, but that's because I got lost one day in Forest Park in Portland. And we ran for about 3 hours and 20 minutes. And I said, somebody said, "You ever run a marathon?" And I said, "Close enough." Okay, that's it for me. I'm ready to move on. But we need goals in things that we do. And the goals are often, people take target goals, but they don't integrate their goals. So they say, "I want to run to lose weight," or "I want to run because I want to have heart health, and maybe I have genetic history in my family, you know, of heart disease." All those things are important, but they're not going to sustain you itself. That one thing does not commonly sustain you. It has to be something you like to do, and you have to find a way that you like to do it. Otherwise, it kind of disappears. But the goal is your own, and the destination is kind of like, to paraphrase the Cheshire Cat, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, which is that you didn't know where you were going. And so it is important, I think, to have a destination. And the destination may be, how mobile do I want to be when I'm 90 years old? How active do I want? How strong do I want to be? What are the elements that I have to incorporate in my life in order to not so much just not be a burden on other people, but in a selfish sense, how to be able to activate myself and how to enjoy, you know, living. So the first thing I talk about is, and I always talk about this, even with every year our students come in, and you guys are up there giving our students, our athletes, physicals, you know, not long ago. We do that every year. But before people really enter into it, if they have a variety of different things going on in their bodies, even if they don't, they need to get a good physical assessment. You know, what's my baseline? You know, you'll know what your blood work looks like, you'll know what your blood pressure is, and you'll have an idea, you know, talk about, I'm not a BMI guy. I don't like, you know, I don't like BMI measurements. I think they lead to the wrong conclusions quite frequently. You know, it was really BMI when we talk about body mass index, you know. And there was a French mathematician, I think, in about 1847 that came up with most of these calculations that have since been altered in order to fit military uniforms on the French troops. Well, we still use some of those things today, you know, to assess our own people. Range of motion. Now, these are the things that I think are really important. We'll have this next 5 items that I think are really critical to what we're doing. Range of motion. And this is to a degree in the order I put them in, and not everybody puts them in this order. But I think the first 2 are coupled. That's range of motion and strength. Because that's the foundation for what we do. If we're not strong enough to support ourselves while in motion, we're going to damage ourselves through overuse. So we have to do certain elements, and I'm not even too concerned about the weight room. There's a number of things that we can do outside of a strength studio. But if any of you belong, there's a lot of things there that you can do. But that's a place where we sometimes get imbalanced as well by not keeping a comprehensive look at our strength training. But range of motion, basically we talk about that and people think flexibility. It's more than just flexibility. It's our ability to move our joints and our body freely through different planes and through balance. And so my range of motion, I used to be able to, let's see if we can do it now. I used to be able to do this, right? But when I used to be able to do it, I was able to put my hands together. Okay, so that's diminished. And if I'm going to have range of motion, I always have to, and we'll see in a minute, be warmed up to have my full range of motion. We'll talk about that. And strength, a variety of different strength exercises. Some you can do in warm-up. Most you won't do in cool-down. Sometimes that's more range of motion time. But there's a variety of exercises you could do, but it needs to be whole body kind of things. And I'm you know, kind of somebody that like to talk about the chain. We won't talk about that, but I like everything that's connected. You know, I like things that are connected, not so much in isolation, particularly for those of you that are running. Sound running mechanics, and we're going to have a running mechanics expert in here to talk to you about running mechanics. I like to think I'm a running mechanics expert. The thing in running mechanics that we have to have is strength, because we have to have good posture. We can't have good mechanics without good posture. Doesn't happen, you know. And if you notice, when you first start running, you know, you have good posture, or reasonable posture. But as you continue and you become fatigued, then you start to break down. You know, the shoulders aren't over the hips, and the back starts to drop a little bit, butt comes down, and you don't land in the same way. You know, when you're first moving, you're landing and the feet are underneath you, and you feel pretty lithe, and you're fluid, and things are moving forward. And then as you start to fatigue, it's either more heel strike, you know, the chain or the pillar is broken. So when I talk about, you know, people talk about core strength, I think the pillar is more important. It starts at the top of the head and it ends at the ground. And let's remember, maybe it starts at the ground. All running starts on the ground. And so your ground contact is very critical to your movements. Your mechanics, you can only have a reaction to the forces that are on the ground. You know, and if those are proper, a lot of good things are going to happen. Speed and skill, and you say, well, I don't need to be fast. You need to be a little faster than your race pace, because your race, you'll slow down. And as you slow down, you start to decay and the posture starts to go in the rest of it. If you're a little bit faster than your race pace, then you're racing at a comfortable pace, you know, or you're running at a comfortable pace. I don't imagine many of you are going to try to break 13 minutes out here for 5K. Some of you are going to be happy to break 23 minutes. Maybe somebody's going to be happy to break 33 minutes, you know, or slower than that. That's not the point. The point is that you're able to yourself, you know, this emotional readiness, who am I and what do I want to accomplish, those things are really critical to what you're going to be able to perform. So let me go back to where I started here: range of motion strength, sound running mechanics, speed and skill, and now where everybody always starts is where I finish. Okay, and that's endurance. I can't build good endurance unless these first four things are in place. Cannot happen. I can go out and make myself tired, but I can't really build the endurance and the movement and the things that are necessary. You know, when you get out of your car and you walk into the grocery store, and we all know that feeling of getting out of the car and we've driven a little bit, or we're just a little stiff from the day's activities, and we get out and the first couple of steps aren't very good. You know, and then we get more fluid as we warm up, or as we're facilitated through our neurology. Well, we have to have these other things before we have endurance in order to be able to move effectively. 5 things: range of motion strength, sound running mechanics, speed and skill. Doesn't have to be all that fast, but it should be skillful. Okay? Kind of like your handwriting. You know, handwriting and you can't read. Oh, there's doctors in the room. I forgot. The handwriting's improved, hasn't it, for doctors? Probably not. Okay. But we're going to run 5,000 meters, and for most of us, that's an endurance race. Now, there's people that's such a jog around the block. Let me, if I could wheel up to page 2. So we got endurance. Now you see practice plan, and that's what we're going to start here, the elements of practice. And as we go right there, we're perfect. Self-assessment. Once again, this is, okay, self-assessment is, let's say we're going to run in the morning. I just got out of bed. What's happening here? Well, I should probably have a little something to drink. I should probably go to the bathroom, and I should probably see if I can feel my feet. You know, what's this day going to be like, right? You know, what yesterday, one day may beget the other. Warm-up. And the warm-up is important to what's the purpose of today's work? What am I trying, probably using apostrophe, what's the purpose of today's work? And you have to think about that. Are you going to do the same thing every day? And I'm going to tell you no. Some days you're going to walk, some days you're going to run, some days you're going to run up hills, some days you're not going to do any of those things. You're going to go to the gym and do, you know, warm-up activities there, be on a bike, because you're going to see in a little bit down here when I start to talk about variation. But what purpose what surface are we going to be on? That may determine what shoes I'm going to wear. You know, if I'm going to be going into the PV Arboretum or one of those places to run, I'll wear a different shoe, perhaps. You know, my shoes are disgusting. I have just acres of shoes in the closet. I, at one point, was able to sell shoes to a reseller that took them to Japan and sold them for big money because they were, you know, classic shoes. I didn't need any more classic shoes in my closet. But you need good footwear. You need good footwear. And because that's where the rubber hits the road, right? It's in your feet. Your feet are in there, your feet, your knees, all those things need to be taken care of. But I think people often buy shoes that are inappropriate for them. They go to get more and more structure in a shoe, and some people need that, and some people don't. And it depends on what your running mechanics are like as to how you hit the ground as to the shoe you need. I like to get the lightest, reasonably lightest shoe I can that provides protection and moderate stability. But I move pretty well on the ground. And so other people have pronation problems or they have other issues. But we're talking today about the purpose of today's work, and surface certainly comes into play there. Whether, how am I going to dress? You want to dress comfortably, not overdressed. You don't necessarily, the people that are going out, and we still see some people do this, commonly wrestlers anymore, but not too many people, go out in kind of a sweatsuit kind of activity. Go out and I want to sweat the weight off. Well, you're going to sweat the water out, but you're not going to sweat any weight off. You know, you might burn a calorie or two that way, but that's really not effective. It is if you're going to wrestle somebody, but maybe not even then. But look at the weather and what you're trying to accomplish in location. Where am I? You know, where am I going to go? Am I out the door? A lot of people would like to think that the best run they have is the one that's the first step, the one that goes out the door. You're familiar with it. I go by your house frequently. You know, it's the place I launch. Okay, but I also look at when I do have the opportunity, I don't have it nearly as much as I'd like, to go out and go to other places. And around here, what a great place to run, walk, and be. You know, all of the McDonald Forest is available to us. Avery Park, for whatever its strengths or shortcomings, are available to us. Crystal Lake. So many, you know, different places around town. I'm not a big fan of bike paths for running because they're asphalt. I'd rather have a natural surface. But I am a big fan of bike paths over running down the concrete on the street or sidewalks because the rhythm is so much better when you're not interrupted, you know, when you can just move. Friends, and you guys are friends, right? I think friends are great. And sometimes, I'm going to say I think friends are great, and I will tell you about me. I don't have any. But no, friends are great because oftentimes it's the friend and the being connected to someone else that provides you with that emotional readiness, with that preparation and commitment to one another that makes things work. I commonly don't run with anybody. Even when I'm with a group and out with groups, I don't much run with anybody because I've got my own things I need to do. And sometimes I have to think about other things other people need to do at the same time. I can't do it all at one time. Brain is not nearly as effective as I think it is. Right? I like to kind of exaggerate my own importance, or my own significance in terms of being able to make my brain work. Doesn't work that way. I need to be alone. But many people, most people I think, can benefit from either a group that shares what's going on, where you get together, and certainly a diary. If you don't have somebody, I think diaries are great that you can take and write down, not always just how far you ran, more importantly, how I felt today. You know, where am I today? And when you look back through that, it doesn't have to be very comprehensive. It's just a day, maybe a line, and you got it. But it helps jog your memory and bring you back to where I was then, and more importantly, say, where am I now? Where was I then? And how do I move forward with that? So which elements am I going to include? And if we could scroll here, thank you. Which elements, and feel free to interrupt or ask questions at any time. This is now where we start to get forming, what we're going to take together, put together. Variation is critical. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. The body does not adapt well to mindless repetition. Same thing, same time, all the time. It adapts to variation, overload. You have to change the load, change the frequency, change the volume. Those things all things are in your control. But your body is going to respond better to change than it is to sameness. So let's get rid of the monotony and actually start to plan. If we went back up to the top where we're talking about our readiness and where we're going to go and what our location is going to be. So location can be a great way to look at what we're going to do in terms of variation, because variation of surface. A lot of motor skill takes place running on trails. There's a little danger in it too, because there's roots and rocks and all kinds of things that can upset you. And there's a place on a Callaway Creek trail that makes me concentrate, where I fell down one time. And I don't fall down very often. I've always prided myself on my trail nimbleness, but I fell down one time. So I concentrate now more on every step I take, on the focus that goes in there. So I'll tell you about focus and concentration in a minute. Flexibility. Flexibility in that range of motion that we talked about earlier allows us the potential of fewer injuries. If something is very static, it wears in one spot. If it's steel, if it's a piece of string, it doesn't matter what it is. If the force is always managed in that one controlled area, then the force is more likely to create a structural failure. Well, if your flexibility is better and your strength is better, that force is going to be distributed. And that distribution of force is going to allow you to get more work done. And that's where we start to talk down here about volume of work. So skills, if I'm running on a trail, I have to be focused on what my foot placement's like. If I'm running down the street, I need to be focused on where my posture is. And then I think I heard somebody speak to this earlier, and that's breathing. Breathing's such a critical element in what we do in our relaxation. And you can do it without, you can start to notice what your heart rate's like without, we talk about different training zones. You can know what your heart rate's like just by watching what your respirations are like. Your respirations get pretty heavy, your heart rate's probably too high for most of the training you're going to be doing. So if we go from, which is still pretty decent breathing, to two things happen. First, our tidal volume has been reduced because we're short breathing. But secondly, it's illustrating that our heart rates are at a higher level than we can work in terms of a developmental training zone. So good, heavy, or full respirations are important. Panting is okay if you're doing that speed work and you're going to stop and then recover. But if you're going to do that for a long period of time, you're probably going to gas yourself and really end up, you get too lactic, but that's a whole nother word. But you put too much stress in your body, it produces the wrong internal structures in terms of oxygen exchange and metabolic waste, and you're less effective. The skills, and so we do a lot of, what I like to do with everybody, I don't care whoever I'm working with, are skills. And some of the skills are simple balance skills. If you can just take and, oh, wait a minute, I'm not very good at that. Okay, and I'm right here and I'm balanced. Bosu balls, where people can flip that Bosu ball and put it down on the, so you're on the hard side, not on the soft side, and you can do, balance skills on Bosu ball. In aging, my goodness, I think the statistics in aging will show us that a huge number of injuries in the aging group, for any of us, but particularly in the people maybe over 50, 60, 70 years old, comes from lack of balance. The fact that we lose balance and strength at the same time. So we could have certain balance capacities, we don't have the strength to hold it, but balance is a big deal. So you have this, motor development. But you're running on the trails, let me get back to that. Let's talk about that in terms of motor learning, Or I talked about this a little earlier today in terms of a child. You know, when a child first, and they come out of the womb and they're kind of tight, you know, and they learn to stretch out and to relax, and it takes them a while, you know, for them to relax. And actually, many of you have seen infants. Some of you have had them, you know, and that relaxation takes a while. And then the eyes start to coordinate the body. And whether you're using mobiles, using some other, you know, small toys and devices, and they become more dexterous. And then they start to walk. And think about this in terms of getting to the endurance. They build skills and strength before they build endurance. Now, I'm not sure that that is a direct transfer to adults, right? But I think it's not a bad model to think about in trying to maintain those earlier things that we're talking about. Motor development, when you're on a trail, your eyes pick up the rocks, the roots, the twists, the changes in elevation, the holes, those different activities. And you translate that into a foot placement on the ground. And you do it without ever thinking about it. And if you think about it, you actually do it better. When you start to practice it, you know, when you start to practice it, you can actually increase those things. So you can use running for mental development. You know, I mean, in terms of just being sharp. We want to keep everything we're doing. We're running up a hill. Our running mechanics uphill and downhill are related to, but different than our running mechanics on the flat. And there's an awful lot of bad information on how you run up and down hills. But you know, those are all skill development and motor development kind of activities. So I don't care if you're 14 or you're 64 or 84, you can learn motor skills. You can develop those things, and things that have decayed you can bring back. Maybe not all the way back, but you know, you bring them back enough so that they make a difference in what's taking place for you. Volume of work, and this goes back to variation. And volume of work is also related to something we call work capacity. And over time, you take these things, and if your work capacity starts here, and if you slowly grow your work capacity, then you're able to do more of these interrelated things more effectively. And you're able to have more endurance. You want to go on vacation. You know, you want to go, you're on a foot tour of Thailand. You know, but you go down there and you're not fit enough to foot tour Thailand, and you need to develop work capacity. And that capacity, sometimes it's just the endurance to make it through the day, and the travels and the different things that you have to do. But work capacity is something that we all have a tendency to lose over time. Our ability to focus, concentrate, to be able to, at the end of the day, not feel like we're a little bit mentally disabled by the fact that we're just overwhelmed by the amount of work we have to do and those kind of things. That's part of our work capacity. That mental work capacity and physical work capacity can be related, can be brought together. Volume of work, we kind of explained, and intensity is something that you need to, intensity is something that you need to have, but you don't need to have too much. This goes back to variation. You know, what part of this am I working with? Yeah, am I working at the beginning? Maybe I can be more intense. Am I working at the end? Well, I'm more fatigued. Can I continue to have some intensity when I'm fatigued? If you're training to race and to have a better time, you're going to have more intensity. If you're training to participate, just to finish, or to run and walk, then the intensity can be much lower. But if we go back up top and we talk about what am I doing this for and what is my destination, those are some of the factors that we have to bring in here. And fun, and I mean this really, you need to find ways to have fun in your training. Go somewhere you want to go and play. Adults forget how to play. And it's a critical, fundamental, integrated part of who we are. And we've managed to take all the play out of our physical activity. And so we approach things for work instead of for play and for enjoyment. And that enjoyment just, once again, goes back to the things that are secreted in the brain, you know, that people talk about endorphins. I don't really believe in a runner's high. I think that's a runner's stupor. You know, they actually get so far they don't know where they are. So they must feel good because they can't feel any pain. But there is a fulfillment in it, and it is emotionally fulfilling. And that's what we want to try and do. And whether it's somebody that's a pretty experienced person, or somebody that's a novice, or getting back into it after many years, the elements are all active. They're all exchangeable. You know, we can put something in and get something back. And the last thing I need to talk about is Cooldown. And so I could have put Cooldown a little further up there after intensity or work volume, but I want to get that fun part in before we get to Cooldown, because the Cooldown's the last thing you do each day. And so to tell you what we do for I do Cooldown exercises, flexibility exercises, and actually take and have our athletes get in an inverted shoulder stand position, just with their legs straight up in the air for 3 minutes. Everybody understand what that's going to look like? Okay. 42 people sitting around with their legs up in the air. It looks like a whole new kind of forest. You know, you know, it has a very interesting look to it. And then, when the weather is nice as it is right now, we come down from that slowly and lay quietly on the ground for 5 minutes and start our recovery right there. We start to tune the nervous system down, we start to let everything flow out, and we start our recovery right there on the ground. Sometimes the best way to go to sleep at night is to lay down on the floor and relax before you get in bed. You know, to put some kind of little ritual to the way you go to sleep. Turn off the screens. You know, give yourself at least half an hour without any blue light. You know, whatever it might be. Let yourself come down, because sleep is where all of the improvement can take place. This is where the body repairs itself. And so those of you working on 6 hours, you're probably an hour and a half to 3 hours short, kind of depending on the person. Need to have so many sleep cycles, you know, going through the evening to repair your brain. To repair your brain, to offset mental decay or other diseases. We need to let things repair your body. I'm not very good at listening to myself sometimes, and I'll work right through that, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have to go, and I've got it down, pretty good plan now. I can get up and go work for half an hour and write down all the things that are racing through my brain and still give myself enough time to come back and get 2 or 3 sleep cycles out of it. I'm not sure that's the way it's supposed to work, right? I'm not sure that's the way it's supposed to work, but we need to be able to take a deep breath, and not just take a deep breath like right here, but take a deep breath while we're sleeping. You know, sometimes you'll hear somebody sleeping. You know, somebody's next to you, they're sleeping, and all of a sudden they get in this deep breathing cycle, you know, and they're really falling into good sleep. We can't accomplish anything here without good sleep. And I do a whole thing on nutrition, but we don't have that much time. I mean, nutrition is just critical to this whole element, and I could do that for you too. And simplifying your diet, cleaning it up. It's usually more about taking things out than putting things in. And that's about it, right?